All right, so today, let's really dive deep into something I know you've been curious about.
Okay.
It's rapport.
Mm-hmm.
You know that like magnetic connection you just feel with some people?
Right.
And today we're really going beyond just like the small talk
Okay.
and really getting into the nitty-gritty of like how it works,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to like romantic sparks flying.
Mm.
So we're going to be unpacking some pretty intriguing audio clips today
Okay.
from this expert in the art of attraction, I guess we could call it.
Uh-huh.
But don't worry, we're not going to turn you into some smooth talking Casanova or anything.
Right.
We're after like the universal gold here, like
Yeah.
rapport building techniques that
Mhm.
can just strengthen any relationship.
So I think what's fascinating about this is that while the source material
Okay.
is very much focused on those romantic connections,
So,
the principles behind rapport
yeah.
are really applicable everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, think about it.
Oh.
Whether it's closing a business deal.
Yeah. Or bonding with a new friend or, yes, even on that first date. Right. That ability to just create that sense of trust and understanding is just key. It's like having that secret weapon that just makes people feel so comfortable with you, right?
Right.
So tell me, what does this expert say
Right.
about like creating that instant connection?
Well, they say repeatedly that rapport is a two-way street.
Okay.
It's not just about you projecting some image or using like these clever techniques.
Yeah.
It's about a genuine connection, a feeling that goes both ways.
Yeah.
And they have this catchy phrase like, what you feel, they feel.
Oh.
So if you're feeling uncomfortable or insincere, the other person will pick up on that like instantly.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah,
It's like when you're on that awkward first date
right.
and you can just tell that the other person's just not into it.
Yeah.
The energy's just off.
Mhm.
So how do we avoid that? What are some like tangible techniques this expert recommends to actually build that genuine connection?
Well, they talk about matching and mirroring.
Okay.
But before you start thinking about mimicking someone's every move,
Yeah.
it's not about being like a copycat.
Okay.
Think subtle,
Okay.
like subtly matching their body language
Mhm.
or their tone of voice, even their breathing.
Wow.
It can create like a subconscious connection.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the picture here.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that just feel a bit forced, though?
Okay.
Like you're putting on an act?
Yeah.
How do you make it feel natural?
The key, they say, is to actually focus on your own emotional state first.
Okay.
Don't try and force a feeling that you don't really have.
Yeah.
Instead, pay attention to the other person's energy and allow yourself to kind of be influenced by it.
Okay.
So if they're relaxed and open,
Yeah.
allow yourself to kind of relax too. If they're enthusiastic and energetic, match that energy.
Got it.
It's about creating this feedback loop
Okay.
where you're both kind of feeding off each other's positive vibes.
So it's not about like manipulating the other person.
Right.
It's about creating that shared emotional experience.
Exactly. It's like tuning into the same radio frequency.
Okay. I like that.
And this is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
They suggest that even simple things like asking questions can actually make or break rapport.
Oh. I've been on dates where it felt like an interrogation.
Right.
Just firing off those standard get-to-know-you questions.
Yeah.
No wonder there weren't any sparks.
And they actually say that
Yeah.
asking questions isn't a rapport killer.
Okay.
It all comes down to your intention and your energy.
Got it.
So if you're genuinely curious about the other person,
Yeah.
if you're asking because you really want to learn more about them, that energy will come across.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those of us who are a little shy? How do you build rapport if you're like terrified to even approach someone?
Well, they actually reframe shyness as a state of mind,
Okay.
not a personality trait.
Oh.
And they say you can actually start building rapport
Yeah.
before you even say a word.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Are you saying you can connect with someone without even talking to them?
Yeah, it's not telepathy or anything.
Okay.
But we communicate so much through those nonverbal cues.
Right.
They hint at some pretty powerful techniques
Okay.
in later excerpts. But the idea is you can actually project this energy
Yeah.
of warmth and openness and approachability
Right.
through your body language
Right.
and just your presence alone.
Okay, so you're sending out those good vibes
Right.
before you even open your mouth. I can see how that would make approaching someone less intimidating.
Yeah.
But let's be honest. There's always that like extra layer of anxiety when you're actually attracted to someone. Does that make rapport harder to build?
Well, interestingly, they say no.
Okay.
They say that the difficulty actually comes from our own limiting beliefs and anxieties about attractiveness.
Okay.
Like we psych ourselves out, thinking that someone out of our league won't be interested.
Right.
And then that anxiety just creates this self-fulfilling prophecy.
So our own insecurities are the biggest roadblock. It's not about how attractive they are. It's about how attractive we believe ourselves to be.
Exactly.
Wow.
It all comes back to managing your emotional state.
Okay.
If you go into it feeling insecure and unworthy, you're going to project that energy, no matter how attractive the other person is.
Right.
But if you cultivate that inner sense of confidence and self-assurance, that will shine through and create that much more positive and magnetic first impression.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the power of this.
Yeah.
It's like confidence is the ultimate aphrodisiac.
Right.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay.
What about intentionally breaking rapport?
Okay.
Could that create a sense of mystery or make someone like want you more? I've heard that like playing hard to get can be effective.
Well, they actually advise against that, especially for beginners.
Right.
They say it requires this really high level of calibration. You need to be able to read the other person's signals, like with extreme precision.
Yeah.
They do mention this technique called fractionation, where you can break rapport strategically to deepen the connection, but it's an advanced skill.
Right.
It can really backfire if it's not done correctly.
So don't play with fire unless you're like a seasoned pro.
Right.
Noted.
Okay.
But let's shift gears for a second.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about like our internal state.
Yeah.
What about the environment?
Right.
Does that play a role in rapport building? I mean, surely a romantic candlelit dinner has a different vibe than like a crowded bar.
They agree with that.
Okay.
They say that while you can build rapport anywhere, certain environments are just more conducive than others.
Yeah.
And they stress that it's important to feel comfortable in your surroundings.
Yeah.
Because if you're feeling awkward or out of place, that's going to affect your ability to connect.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So choose your battleground wisely.
Right.
But let's say you've nailed the environment. You're feeling super confident. You've established this great connection. How do you keep that spark alive in long-term relationships? Yeah. Things change over time.
Right. They say that that's where the ongoing work of emotional control comes in.
Okay.
So you're using rapport to not just ignite that initial spark, but to actually maintain it and strengthen that connection over the long haul.
Okay.
They suggest that you can actually use rapport to guide your partner towards more positive states, even when things get tough.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So rapport isn't just about that initial honeymoon phase.
Right.
It's about like continually nurturing that emotional connection.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is they suggest that rapport can actually help you spot those potential red flags.
Wait, how so?
Early on in a relationship.
Okay.
Yeah. By tuning in to your partner's emotional landscape, you gain these valuable insights into their patterns and their tendencies.
So you're saying by being attuned to someone's emotions, it can actually help you see potential problems down the line.
Exactly.
That's some serious intel.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about a common dating frustration, flaking.
Right.
You know, when someone seems totally into, agrees to meet up, and then radio silence.
Yep.
Is there any way to use rapport to prevent that from happening?
Oh, you're going to love this. They actually say that deep rapport is the ultimate defense against flaking.
What?
Yeah. They explain that when you build that strong connection, people are much less likely to break commitments because they value the connection and they don't want to jeopardize it.
So it's about creating a bond that's strong enough to actually withstand those like fleeting impulses to cancel.
Exactly.
I'm intrigued, but how do you make that happen?
Okay.
What's the secret sauce?
Well, they introduced this concept of a pleasure anchor.
Okay.
Essentially, you want to link positive emotions to yourself.
Okay.
So that people associate you with those good feelings. Think about it. If someone consistently feels happy and energized and fulfilled when they're with you, they're much less likely to want to spend their time elsewhere.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm all about being authentic.
Okay.
And this is all starting to sound a bit manipulative. How do you avoid coming across as needy or phony when you're using these rapport-building techniques? There's a fine line between charming and creepy.
They're all about genuineness.
Okay.
They argue that if your only goal is seduction, it's going to show. So instead they say, shift from that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset.
What does that mean?
It means believing that you are inherently attractive and desirable.
Okay.
And that you have something valuable to offer.
Yeah.
And that you don't need anyone to validate you.
So confidence comes from within.
Yes.
It's not about trying to win someone over.
Right.
It's about believing in your own worth.
That's the heart of it.
Okay.
And that inner confidence is incredibly magnetic.
Right.
It draws people to you because it suggests that you're secure and self-assured and just genuinely enjoyable to be around.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, but I have to ask,
Sure.
Can you actually change someone's emotional state?
Using rapport? I mean, let's say someone's having a bad day.
Yeah.
Can you use rapport to, like, lift their spirits?
It's a great question, and they have a simple answer.
Okay.
Change your state first.
Oh.
Remember what you feel they feel.
Right.
Emotions are contagious.
Yeah.
So if you want to shift their mood, start by shifting your own.
Yeah.
And they talk about this technique called pacing and leading.
Okay.
Where you match their emotional state first.
Okay.
That's pacing.
Yeah.
And then you gradually shift to the desired state.
Got it.
And that's leading.
So you're subtly guiding the emotional flow of the interaction. It's almost like an emotional dance.
That's a great analogy.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. We've talked a lot about rapport and attraction, but can you have attraction without rapport?
Okay.
I mean, isn't that initial spark sometimes just like a chemical reaction?
They actually argue that attraction is a form of rapport.
They describe it as like this highly focused, intensified emotional connection.
So instead of them being like separate concepts, attraction is actually a subset of rapport.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting.
It is.
It kind of reframes the whole idea of how we approach dating and relationships.
It does.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
But let's address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
How do you transition from rapport to seduction? I mean, that's the ultimate goal for a lot of people.
Right.
How do you make that move without things feeling awkward or forced?
Well, their approach is if you've built that genuine rapport, seduction just becomes this natural progression, not this forced outcome.
So it's not about closing the deal.
Right.
It's about enjoying the journey
and
seeing where it leads. That's a great point.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect place to pause for now.
Okay.
We've covered so much ground already. And I'm really eager to dive deeper into the specifics of how to create that magnetic connection.
Yeah, I'm ready to unpack even more of their insights, especially when it comes to turning those initial sparks of rapport into something more.
All right, listeners, we'll be right back
to
continue our deep dive into the power of rapport.
Sounds good. It's about creating an experience where seduction feels like the most natural and enjoyable next step for both people involved.
Okay, so it's not about closing the deal. It's about creating a shared journey.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, throughout our deep dive so far, I've noticed that this expert consistently highlights the importance of emotional control.
Right.
Why do you think they emphasize that so much?
That's a great observation. It's absolutely crucial to their philosophy.
Okay.
They argue that mastering your own emotional state is like fundamental to building rapport and navigating social dynamics effectively. Think of it this way. Emotions are like energy.
Right.
And they can be contagious.
Right.
So if you're projecting like insecurity or anxiety, it kind of creates this ripple effect that impacts the other person's emotional state and the whole dynamic of the interaction.
Oh, that's a really powerful point.
Yeah.
It makes me think of those times when I've been around someone who's like super negative and it's almost impossible not to get sucked into that vortex of negativity.
Exactly.
But on the flip side, when you're around someone who's genuinely positive and upbeat, their energy is infectious.
It is.
So it's like you're choosing what kind of energy you want to project.
Right.
And how that's going to impact the people around you.
Exactly. And they give some great tips for developing that inner strength and confidence.
Yeah.
They talk a lot about shifting to an abundance mindset.
Okay.
Believing that you have something unique and valuable to offer, and recognizing that you are worthy of connection and love.
I love that. It's about shifting from that place of lack to a place of abundance.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that wonders, what if I'm missing those signals from people who are actually interested in me?
Right.
What if I'm so caught up in my own insecurities that I'm completely blind to the positive attention I might be receiving?
That's a common struggle.
Oh?
And they address that head on. They say that most people are more attractive than they think they are.
Okay.
And more importantly, that more people are attracted to them than they realize.
Okay. That's quite the statement.
Yeah.
But why do we miss those signals? Is it just a lack of confidence, or is there something else going on?
I think lack of confidence definitely plays a role, but it can also be just being too focused on our own anxieties and insecurities.
Yeah.
You know, we get so preoccupied with our own internal dialogue, with those self-critical thoughts, that we totally miss those subtle cues and invitations.
It's like we're wearing those metaphorical blinders, blocking out all the positive attention that's right there in front of us.
Exactly. And they suggest that by shifting our mindset from scarcity to abundance, we can start to see the world and our place in it in a much more positive and receptive light. It's about recognizing our own worth and believing that we deserve good things, including love and connection.
I'm really resonating with this idea of shifting our mindset.
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
It is.
You know, another concept I found really intriguing was this idea of a pleasure anchor, which we touched on earlier. Can you unpack that a bit more?
Yeah.
How does that actually work in practice?
Well, they suggest that by consistently linking positive emotions to yourself, you essentially become a source of pleasure and joy for others.
So you're saying you become like a walk and talk and good vibe generator.
Exactly. It's not about manipulation or trying to force anything. It's about genuinely being someone who brings joy and positivity to others.
Okay, so it ties back to the importance of being authentic.
Yes.
And being genuinely enjoyable to be around. If you're projecting negativity or boredom or neediness, that's what people will associate with you.
Exactly.
But if you exude warmth and humor and positivity, those become your calling card.
Yes.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
So basically, be the kind of person you'd want to hang out with.
Exactly.
Simple, yet profound.
Right.
You know, I have to admit, I'm still a bit skeptical about this whole attraction as rapport thing.
Yeah.
It makes sense on a theoretical level, but in my experience, there's a difference between feeling friendly rapport with someone and feeling attracted to them.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on how they explain this seemingly contradictory idea?
Okay. Well, while it might seem counterintuitive at first, there's actually compelling logic to it.
Okay.
Think about it. Attraction at its core is an intense emotional response. It's about feeling drawn to someone, feeling excited and energized in their presence.
Okay.
And rapport, as we've discussed, is about establishing that sense of connection and emotional resonance.
So you're saying that attraction is essentially a heightened, more focused form of rapport.
Yes.
Like a laser beam of emotional connection.
You could say that.
Okay.
It's about amplifying those feelings of warmth and excitement and connection to create a more intense and specifically romantic experience.
So think about the times you felt instantly drawn to someone.
Right.
There's usually an underlying sense of connection there, a feeling that you're on the same wavelength, even if you've only just met.
Exactly.
Okay, that's starting to click for me.
Okay, good.
But how do you actually make that leap from general rapport to something more charged? How do you take things to that next level?
Well, they emphasize the importance of escalation, both emotionally and physically. So it's about gradually intensifying the emotional depths of the interaction while also subtly increasing physical touch and proximity.
So creating a sense of momentum, building towards a more intimate connection.
Exactly.
So it's like a dance where you're gradually moving closer, increasing the intensity, but always being mindful of the other person's cues and responses.
It's a delicate dance
of
calibration and responsiveness.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those of us who are calibration challenged?
Okay.
How do you know when it's the right time to make a move?
Well, that's where intuition and experience come in.
Okay.
They suggest paying attention to both verbal and nonverbal cues.
Okay.
look for signs of interest and engagement.
Like what?
Like sustained eye contact, leaning in, mirroring your body language, a playful or flirtatious tone of voice.
So it's about becoming a master of reading between the lines.
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
It's about developing that sensitivity to those subtle shifts in energy and responsiveness.
Are there any, like, universal indicators that someone is open to escalating the interaction? Any, like, surefire signs?
There's no guaranteed formula.
Okay.
But they do mention several key signs to look for.
Okay.
Including sustained eye contact, increased physical touch, mimicking your body language, and a playful or flirtatious tone of voice.
So it's a combination of verbal and nonverbal cues that paint a bigger picture. It's not just about one green light. It's about seeing that whole traffic signal turn green.
That's a great analogy.
I like that one.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that everyone communicates differently.
Right.
And what might be a clear sign of attraction for one person might be completely platonic for another.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good reminder. You know, one thing I've always struggled with is the dreaded friend zone.
Right.
You know, when you build great rapport with someone, but the romantic spark just isn't there.
Is there a way to avoid getting stuck in that platonic purgatory?
That's where their emphasis on intention comes in.
Okay.
They argue that if your sole goal is seduction, it can actually undermine your efforts to build genuine rapport.
Interesting.
It creates this subtle pressure that can be felt by the other person, and it can make you come across as inauthentic or even manipulative.
So you're saying that if you're genuinely interested in connecting with someone on a deeper level, romantic or otherwise, that sincerity will shine through.
Exactly.
And create a more authentic and attractive energy.
It does.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about approaching interactions with a spirit of genuine connection and curiosity.
Yes.
Rather than with an agenda or outcome in mind.
Right. And paradoxically, that approach
often
leads to more romantic success.
Okay.
Because it allows for that natural chemistry to develop organically. Yeah. That's really interesting. You know, one thing that keeps coming up for me is this idea of managing my own emotional state.
Right.
It's so crucial to this whole rapport building process.
It is.
But it's also something I find incredibly challenging, especially in those high pressure situations. Do you have any, like, practical tips for staying calm, cool, and collected when you're feeling those butterflies fluttering around in your stomach?
It's definitely a skill that takes practice.
Okay.
But they offer some fantastic tips.
Yeah.
They suggest a combination of mindfulness practices.
Okay.
Cognitive reframing techniques, and just developing a strong sense of self-awareness.
So becoming the master of your own mind.
You could say that.
Taming those inner gremlins.
Right. It's about developing the ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment. Yeah. And choosing how you want to respond to them. Okay. Rather than letting them control you.
That sounds like a lifelong journey.
It is a journey.
But what about those moments when you're just feeling overwhelmed by those nerves, those butterflies?
Right.
Is there anything you can do in the heat of the moment to regain control?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They recommend a few simple but powerful techniques.
Okay.
First, take a few deep breaths.
Yeah.
Focusing on the sensation of your breath as it enters and leaves your body.
Okay.
This helps to ground you in the present moment.
Right.
And just calm those racing thoughts.
Okay.
Second, focus on your physical sensations.
Okay.
The feeling of your feet on the ground. The feeling of your clothes against your skin. This helps to shift your attention away from those anxious thoughts and back to your body.
Right.
Which is always anchored in the present moment.
I like that.
Yeah. And finally, remind yourself of your strengths and your positive qualities.
To give yourself a little pep talk.
Exactly.
Okay, it sounds so simple, but I can see how powerful that could be.
It is, and they emphasize that.
Yeah.
The more you practice these techniques, the easier it will become to regulate your emotions and maintain that sense of composure, even in those challenging situations.
That's encouraging. You know, one of the boldest claims they make is that deep rapport is the best defense against flaking.
Right.
Can you break that down for me? Yeah. Why would having a strong connection make someone less likely to cancel plans?
Well, it's actually pretty simple when you think about it.
Okay.
When you establish a strong connection with someone, they're less likely to dismiss or disregard your plans.
Right.
Because they value that connection.
Okay.
They're excited to spend time with you.
Yeah.
and they don't want to jeopardize that.
So it's not about guilt-tripping them or making them feel obligated.
No.
It's about creating that genuine sense of mutual respect and enjoyment.
Exactly. And it ties back to the pleasure anchor concept.
Right.
When you become associated with those positive emotions and experiences, people naturally want to spend more time with you.
Okay.
Because they anticipate those good feelings.
So it's about creating a win-win situation. You get to connect with someone you enjoy.
Right.
And they get to experience the joy and positivity that you bring to the table.
That's the ideal.
That's great.
And they argue that this approach is not only more ethical, but also more sustainable in the long run.
Right.
It's about building those authentic connections based on mutual respect, enjoyment, and shared experiences.
I love that. You know, there was one concept they mentioned that I'm still curious about, fractionation.
Right.
They didn't go into much detail, but it sounded pretty intense.
It is definitely a more advanced technique.
Okay.
And they caution that it should only be used by those who are highly skilled in rapport building and calibration.
So proceed with caution.
Yes.
But what exactly is it?
In essence, fractionation involves intentionally breaking rapport and then rebuilding it, creating a deeper sense of connection through a process of emotional oscillation.
Emotional oscillation.
Yeah, think of it like a roller coaster of emotions.
Okay.
You create a momentary disruption, a bit of tension, and then you smooth things over, bringing the interaction back to that positive state.
So it's like playing hot and cold.
You could say that.
Creating a push and pull dynamic?
Yeah, the theory is that by creating those momentary disruptions, you create a sense of intrigue and anticipation.
Right.
And then when you rebuild the connection, it feels even stronger because it's been tested and reaffirmed.
So it's like the saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
But they stress that fractionation should never be used to manipulate or play games with someone's emotions.
Got it.
It's a tool for deepening connection, not for creating drama or insecurity.
You use it wisely. Yes, it requires a high level of sensitivity and awareness.
Right.
And it should only be used with good intentions.
Well said. You know, I'm still pondering this idea of seduction being a natural progression of rapport. It all sounds very effortless in theory.
Right.
But sometimes doesn't it require a bit more assertiveness to move things forward?
They acknowledge that there are times when a more direct approach might be necessary.
Okay.
It's about reading the situation, gauging the other person's comfort level, and adjusting your approach accordingly.
So it's about finding that balance between allowing things to unfold organically and taking initiative when the moment feels right.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this.
Good.
You know, I'm curious to learn more about the role of physical touch in building rapport.
Yeah.
I know they mentioned it in passing, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how touch can enhance connection.
Well, physical touch is a really powerful tool
for building rapport, especially in romantic contexts.
Right.
You know, it creates a sense of intimacy and warmth and connection that words alone just can't convey.
Okay.
Think about it, a hug, a touch on the arm, a playful nudge.
Yeah.
These small gestures can communicate so much about your feelings and intentions.
So it's not just about what you say, but how you touch.
Exactly. And they emphasize the importance of starting with subtle, non-invasive touches.
Okay.
Like brushing someone's arm or shoulder during a conversation.
Right.
And then as the connection deepens, you can gradually escalate the intensity and duration of the touch.
Got it.
Always being mindful of the other person's comfort level.
So it's a gradual progression,
Yes.
like a slow burn, building towards that more intimate connection.
Precisely. And the key is to be attuned to the other person's responses.
Okay.
If they're pulling back or seeming uncomfortable, you respect their boundaries and you dial back the touch.
Okay.
But if they're leaning in and reciprocating, it's a sign that they're enjoying that physical connection and they're open to further exploration.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those of us who are touch averse?
Oh.
I'm not the most physically affectionate person.
Yeah.
So is there a way to build rapport without relying on touch?
Absolutely.
Okay.
While physical touch can enhance connection, it's not the only way to build rapport.
Okay.
You can also create a sense of intimacy through deep eye contact, attentive listening, and sharing personal stories, and vulnerabilities, these all communicate trust and openness.
Okay.
Allowing the other person to feel seen and understood.
So it's about finding other ways to convey warmth and connection, even if you're not comfortable with physical touch.
Exactly. And they emphasize that the most important factor is authenticity.
Right.
So if you're forcing yourself to be touchy-feely, when it doesn't feel natural, it's going to come across as insincere.
Right.
It's about finding what feels genuine and authentic for you and letting that guide your interactions.
Well said. You know, I'm still struggling with this idea of shifting from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset.
Right.
It's easy to say, believe in yourself, you're awesome.
Yeah.
But how do you actually make that internal shift?
Yeah.
It feels like such a deeply ingrained pattern.
It's definitely a journey, and it often requires a combination of things, like cognitive reframing, practicing gratitude, and surrounding yourself with positive and supportive people.
Okay.
So it's about rewiring your brain to see the world and yourself in a more positive and abundant light.
So it's about consciously challenging those limiting beliefs.
Yes.
And replacing them with more empowering thoughts.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process, not a one-time fix.
Okay.
It takes practice and commitment to shift those deep-seated beliefs. But the rewards are immeasurable.
Okay.
When you approach life from that place of abundance, you just open yourself up to a world of possibilities and connections that you might have otherwise missed out on.
That's so inspiring. You know, a lot of listeners might be wondering, how do you even initiate a conversation with someone you're interested in?
Right.
What are some good opening lines or icebreakers that can help spark a connection?
Well, that's where their emphasis on context and authenticity comes in.
Okay.
They say there's no magic formula or pickup line that will work in every situation.
Yeah.
The best approach is to be genuine, observant, and responsive to the specific context of the interaction.
So ditch the canned lines and pay attention to the surroundings.
Exactly. If you're at a bookstore, you might comment on the book someone is browsing.
Right.
If you're at a party, you might ask how they know the host. The key is to find a natural and relevant conversation starter.
Okay.
That allows you to connect with the other person authentically.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those of us who struggle with social anxiety?
Okay.
Even the thought of approaching someone can send my heart racing.
Right.
How do you overcome those feelings of fear and self-doubt?
Well, this is where their advice on managing your emotional state becomes even more important.
Yeah.
They suggest practicing relaxation techniques.
Like what?
Like deep breathing.
Okay.
Or visualization.
So take a deep breath and picture yourself succeeding.
Exactly.
Visualize that smooth and confident interaction.
Yes. And they also emphasize the importance of reframing your thoughts.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on your anxieties. Like, what if I mess this up?
Yeah.
Try focusing on the potential for a positive interaction.
So shift your perspective from fear to possibility.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
But what if you do manage to strike up a conversation and it starts to fizzle out? How do you keep the momentum going and avoid those awkward silences?
Well, this is where their emphasis on active listening and genuine curiosity comes in.
Right.
They suggest asking open-ended questions, sharing personal anecdotes, and looking for common interest to keep the conversation flowing.
So be an engaging conversational partner. Be genuinely interested in what the other person has to say.
Yes, and they emphasize the importance of being present in the moment.
Right.
Rather than worrying about what to say next or trying to impress the other person.
Okay.
When you're truly present, you'll naturally pick up on those subtle cues that can lead to deeper, more meaningful conversations.
So let go of the pressure and just enjoy the interaction.
Exactly.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It is.
But I can see how that would make a world of difference.
Yeah.
But let's face it, not every interaction is going to lead to a connection. How do you handle rejection gracefully?
That's where their emphasis on an abundance mindset and self-worth comes in.
Okay.
They say that rejection is simply a part of life.
Right.
And it doesn't reflect on your value as a person.
So don't take it personally.
Exactly.
Okay.
Everyone has their own preferences and circumstances.
Yeah.
And sometimes those just won't align with yours.
Right.
They encourage viewing rejection as an opportunity to learn and grow.
Okay.
Rather than as a personal failure.
That's a much more positive way to look at it.
It is.
Okay, but what if you're repeatedly facing rejection?
Yeah.
At what point do you start to question your approach?
Well, they suggest it's important to be open to feedback.
Okay.
And to adjust your approach if you're not seeing the results you desire.
So like what?
Well, it might be time to experiment with different conversation starters.
Okay.
Or refine your nonverbal communication.
Uh-huh.
Or work on developing your confidence and self-assurance.
So don't be afraid to experiment and try new things. To keep learning and evolving.
They emphasize that social skills are like any other skill.
Right.
They require practice and refinement.
Okay.
And what works for one person might not work for another.
Yeah.
It's all about finding your own unique style and approach that feels authentic and effective for you.
That's really encouraging.
It is.
It takes the pressure off. You know, something I've always wondered about is the role of humor in building rapport.
Yeah.
Everyone loves a good laugh, right?
They do.
So is it as simple as cracking a joke and watching the sparks fly?
Humor is definitely a powerful tool for creating connection and building rapport. It helps break the ice, diffuse tension, and just make interactions more enjoyable.
But they caution against forcing it. We're trying too hard to be funny.
Right.
So just be yourself and let your natural wit shine through.
Exactly.
Don't force it.
And they emphasize the importance of being mindful of your audience. What one person finds hilarious, another might find offensive.
Totally.
So it's important to be sensitive to cultural norms and personal preferences.
What about self-deprecating humor?
Okay.
Is it ever a good idea to poke fun at yourself?
They suggest that a bit of self-deprecating humor can be endearing and help you come across as more relatable and approachable.
Right.
But again, they caution against overdoing it or putting yourself down excessively.
So a lighthearted jab here and there is fine, but don't turn yourself into the punchline.
Right.
Don't let self-deprecation turn into self-sabotage.
Exactly. The key is to strike that balance between being confident and being humble.
Yeah. You want to project that air of self-assurance while also showing that you don't take yourself
too seriously.
Yeah, exactly. The key is to strike a balance between being confident and being humble.
Yes.
You want to project that air of self-assurance while also showing that you don't take yourself too seriously.
Right.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it leads me to another question.
Okay.
How do you avoid coming across as arrogant or cocky when you're feeling confident?
Right.
Is there a way to project that inner confidence without seeming like you're full of yourself?
Well, they emphasize that genuine confidence isn't about being superior to others.
Yeah.
It's about feeling secure in yourself. It's about recognizing your worth and value without needing that external validation.
So it's not about bragging or putting others down.
Right.
It's about radiating that inner sense of self-assurance.
Precisely.
So how do you cultivate that inner confidence?
Okay.
How do you silence that inner critic that tells you you're not good enough?
Well, they suggest starting by focusing on your strengths and accomplishments, no matter how small they may seem.
Right.
Celebrate your wins, acknowledge your progress, and give yourself credit for all the amazing things you've already achieved.
So make a list of all the awesome things about yourself.
Exactly.
Toot your own horn a little.
Yeah. It's about recognizing your own worth and value.
Okay.
And they also recommend practicing positive self-talk.
Okay. So challenge those negative thoughts.
Yes.
And replace them with more empowering and affirming beliefs.
Right. So be your own best friend.
Be your own best friend.
Talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you love and care about.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And they emphasize that. The more you practice self-love and self-acceptance, the more confident and secure you will become in your interactions with others.
You know, I've always felt like it's easier to connect with people when you have something in common.
Right.
Is that true, or is that just a limiting belief?
Well, shared experiences can be incredibly powerful in building rapport. They provide that foundation for conversation.
Right.
They create a sense of connection and belonging.
Yeah.
And they foster a sense of shared identity.
So find common ground and watch the sparks fly.
You could say that.
I like that.
Yeah, and they suggest that shared experiences can range from simple things, like having similar taste in music or movies, to more profound experiences, like overcoming a challenge together or sharing a deeply personal story.
Okay, that makes sense. But what if you don't have a lot in common with someone?
Right.
How do you create that sense of connection when there isn't an obvious shared experience to draw upon?
Well, this is where their emphasis on curiosity and open-mindedness comes in. They suggest that even when you don't share similar interests or experiences, you can still create a connection by being genuinely interested in learning about the other person's world. Ask questions, listen attentively, and be open to new perspectives and experiences.
So basically be genuinely interested in getting to know them.
Yes.
Even if their world seems completely different from yours. Be a student of their experience.
Exactly. They suggest that curiosity is like this magical key that can unlock hidden connections and create bridges of understanding between seemingly disparate worlds.
I love that analogy. It's about seeing the world through someone else's eyes, expanding your horizons, and discovering those unexpected points of connection.
Yes.
You know, one technique we keep coming back to is pacing and leading emotionally. And I have to admit, I'm still a bit wary of it. It feels a bit manipulative, like you're subtly trying to control the other person's emotions. How do you make that distinction between guiding the interaction and being manipulative?
That's an important distinction, and they are very clear that emotional pacing and leading should always be done with respect and empathy and a genuine desire to create a positive and mutually enjoyable experience. It's not about imposing your will on someone or trying to force them to feel a certain way.
Got it.
It's about being attuned to their emotional state and gently guiding them towards a more positive or exciting state.
So it's about being in tune with their emotional state and gently guiding them, rather than trying to force them to feel something they're not.
Exactly. And they suggest that the key to effective pacing and leading is to first establish that strong rapport. So once you've created that foundation of trust and connection, you can gradually shift your own emotional state in the desired direction while observing the other person's responses and adjusting accordingly.
So it's like a delicate dance.
Yes.
Where you're both leading and following at the same time. You're responding to each other's cues and creating a shared emotional experience.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And they emphasize that it should always feel natural and organic and enjoyable for both parties involved.
I'm starting to see the art of it.
Good.
It's about being sensitive and attuned and responsive. Rather than trying to force or control their emotions.
Exactly.
You know, we've talked a lot about confidence, but what does it really mean to be confident? And how do you project that confidence when you're feeling anything but?
That's a question that's been pondered for centuries.
I know, right?
There's no easy answer. But they suggest that confidence isn't about arrogance. Or bravado. It's about that inner sense of self-assurance and belief in your own worth.
So it's not about trying to impress others or put on a show.
Exactly.
It's about genuinely believing in yourself and your ability to connect.
And they emphasize that confidence isn't something you either have or don't have. It's a skill that can be developed through practice, self-reflection, and a willingness to step outside of your comfort zone.
So it's a journey.
It is.
Okay, that's encouraging. But what are some practical tips for cultivating confidence? Where do you even begin?
Well, they suggest starting by identifying your strengths and accomplishments, no matter how small they may seem. Write them down, reflect on them, and just allow yourself to feel proud of all the amazing things you've already accomplished.
So make a list of all the awesome things about yourself.
Exactly.
Toot your own horn a little.
Yes, it's about recognizing your own worth and value. And they also recommend practicing positive self-talk.
So challenge those negative thoughts that say you're not good enough. And replace them with more empowering and affirming beliefs.
Exactly. So be your own best friend.
Be your own best friend.
Talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you love and care about.
Precisely.
And they emphasize that the more you practice self-love and self-acceptance, the more confident and secure you will become in your interactions with others.
You know, throughout this deep dive, we've covered so many fascinating aspects of rapport.
We have.
Matching and mirroring, emotional pacing and leading the pleasure anchor, even fractionation. It's clear that building rapport is a skill that takes practice and awareness and a genuine desire to connect.
And it's remarkable that even though their work focuses on romantic relationships.
Yeah.
The principles they outline are really applicable to every area of life. So whether you're networking or building friendships, negotiating a business deal, or navigating family dynamics, that ability to create rapport can just transform your interactions and deepen your connection.
It's like having a superpower that allows you to build these bridges of understanding.
Yes.
And create more meaningful and fulfilling relationships.
It is, and it all starts with that willingness to show up authentically, to be present, and to genuinely care about the other person.
Well said. I think we've officially cracked the code of connection.
We have.
We've explored the power of rapport,
Yeah.
delved into some seriously fascinating techniques, and even touched on the art of seduction.
And I think what's really striking is that even in that context of seduction, they emphasize the importance of genuine connection, emotional intelligence, and respect for the other person.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even in the most intimate of interactions, human connection should always be at the forefront.
Right.
It's not about games or manipulation. It's about creating a shared experience that's pleasurable and fulfilling and respectful for both people involved.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note,
Yeah.
I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
I think it is. But before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder. Think about the people in your life, your friends, your family, your colleagues, even those casual acquaintances you encounter throughout your day.
Right.
How could a deeper understanding of rapport transform those relationships?
Right.
How could it enrich your interactions, deepen your connections, and create more joy and meaning in your life?
That's something to chew on.
It is.
Yeah. And remember, rapport is a skill that can be learned and cultivated.
Right.
The more you practice, the more natural it will become.
Okay.
So go out there, be present, be curious, be authentic,
Right.
and watch those connections blossom.
Well said. Until next time, keep diving deep.